morning, everyone. It's so good to be here. So for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to walk you through different people in my life that have really made a difference. So you often hear me say, or if you go into my social media, you hear me say, we don't do this alone. How many of you feel like you don't do this alone? Whatever we do, we really don't. So I'm going to walk you through some of the people in my life from the very beginning that have really made an impact in my life. And my intention is that when you walk out these doors, that you will be transformed by one of these stories that I'm going to give to you in the next 20 minutes. Fair? Okay. I wasn't supposed to live when I was born. The doctor told my mom, this baby's not going to live. You better get the funeral arrangements made. And that was because my father, who was a very successful businessman, he was also an alcoholic, and he used to beat up my mom. So he beat her up when I was in utero. At 12, my mom sat us down and said, I'm leaving. He's going to kill me. A few weeks before then, he almost killed her right in front of me. And so in an airplane ride, we came to the United States. And in that same airplane ride, we went from being very wealthy to being very poor. At that moment, I vowed that someday I was going to retire my mom. And so my mother, a woman of society, started working in a factory. She got paid 25 cents for a pair of jeans she sewed. And I began to be Cinderella. I cleaned houses and babysat. But I knew that someday I was going to be retiring my mom. And in order to do that, I needed to get an education. So I did. And after many years, fast forward, I retired my mom. I actually called my mother at the factory and said, what are you doing? She said, I'm on a break. And I said, well, pack your bags because today's your last day. I had just gotten a big bonus. And I said, today's your last day and pack your bags because we're going to Mexico. Tell your boss that you're not coming back. And that day, thank you. It's funny because I get emotional every time I say that because it was such a dream for me to retire my mom. Fast forward, there have been many people. So let me finish the cycle on my father. My father left alcoholism, and he came to the United States and apologized to my mother and to my brothers and I, and it was just an incredible moment for all of us. When I was little, my father would take me to see the people that worked for him, and he taught me how to be an entrepreneur. I had no idea. We would go. He had a transportation business that I inherited later after he passed away. And so for me, he taught me that it's okay to be imperfect because you have an opportunity to turn your life around. He taught me how to treat employees. He taught me about ethics and about being a person of your word. Even though he was a sick man, he transformed completely after he left alcoholism. From my mother, I learned my first value-centered decision that I made. From my mother, I learned how to be a strong woman, how to create those edges for herself because she said, enough, no more, and I'm leaving. And she came to a totally different country. So coming into a new country with a new life was completely different for her. And so she did that for all of us. I made a list of different people that I wanted to share with you because not everybody is the same and not everybody brings something different to your life. So let me tell you about Fernando. Fernando was my oldest brother, and he passed away of a glioblastoma. Do you know what a glioblastoma is? It's a cancer tumor in your brain. His IQ was 169. And so he was very, very smart. And what he found was he was an engineer, and he would do the calculations in his brain. Now, what I learned from my brother was the grace with which he proceeded to pass away. He ended up passing away after 20 plus months. The doctors had told him that he only had 3 months. So he started to really understand his body, and he started to want to give back whatever it was that he had. So he had a radio show, And I remember going to see him. I took care of him for the last 6 months of his life. And I remember the word gratitude and how that became my lifeline in my life when my brother was passing away. When he could barely even move any part of his body, I would come and give him jokes, like whisper jokes in his ear, and he could barely even move. So he just moved his finger just a tiny little bit. And I knew that he was listening. He never complained. He was always grateful. And I remember reading in my journal, my goodness, this is how I'm going to get through this. It's gratitude. And what gratitude has taught me, what my brother taught me during those times, was that gratitude is something that I get to take with me, because when we're grateful, we're abundant. When we're grateful, we're humble. And humility is such a beautiful thing. It doesn't matter where we are. When we're grateful, we know that what's in front of us is much bigger than us. And we just become grateful and we become humble. So that was Fernando. Jorge Molina was my engineering boss in my first company. I was 15 years old and I became engineering department secretary. And he gave me the chance. This was a man in an engineering department, and the previous administrative assistant had passed away. And I said, can I try? And he said, all the engineers said, she's too young. Forget it. Absolutely not. He said, well, let's give her a chance. I said, I tell you what, don't give me a raise. Just try me for 3 months. In fact, don't even pay me. And let me just try it. And I became the engineering department secretary. So this man gave me a chance. And what I learned was that all I had to do was just ask, can I try anyway? Can I do it anyway? If I would have heard the other engineers, I would have said, well, I'm too young. I don't speak the language too well. I'm too short. I'm too whatever. You fill in the blanks. That's what it would have been. But Jorge Molina taught me, okay, if I just ask, maybe, just maybe, they will give it to me. Lynn Pike was an incredible woman who was my boss. She was afraid of speaking in public, and so I became the very first strategy director at Wells Fargo for 300 branches in Southern California. And we did a huge turnaround, huge. But she was afraid to speak in public or didn't care to speak in public. So I said, can I do it? I'll speak. And so I spoke on behalf of the bank, and that's when my speaking career began many, many years ago. When I would speak for American Bankers Association, I spoke in Singapore, I spoke all over the world about some of the turnarounds. So Lynn taught me how to give abundantly because her ego wasn't so big that she had to be in the front. She allowed me to come and encouraged me to be the face of the company, to be the one who actually talked about the strategies that she and I put together that went ahead and turned around our division. General Mick Kicklighter is someone, a 3-star general that I had dinner at his home with a king 2 weeks ago. General Kicklighter I met because I was writing my book on my book's name is #Values. And if any one of you would like a free book, I'm going to tell you how to do it a little bit later. So the general, and I call him Mick, so we went to Mick's house. But what Mick taught me was that all I had to do was ask. Again, it was a reinforcement of what George Molina taught me earlier. This is what happened. I said, Mick, after I interviewed him, I said, hey, Mick, I would love to break bread with you. After we prayed together, after I interviewed him, we prayed together, we cried together because we realized, I told him, I want my book to be in the hands of every leader in the world, and we're going to change the trajectory of values across the world. And so we wept together, we cried together. I said, can I have breakfast with you and your bride tomorrow? And he says, oh, no. We're going to be busy. We're going to go to a Bible study. And I said, oh, can I come? And he looked at me and he said, you can come. And I thought, what's the big deal? It's just a Bible study. Well, I didn't know this, but this morning, I dialed up to the same Bible study that is held in an extension of the White House, and it's generals and from the White House and the Pentagon, and it's different people from both sides of the aisle that get together to study the Bible and to talk about what this Bible means to us as leaders and as individuals. And I got to go. Not only did I get to go, I got to sit in his seat, in the general seat. So what I learned from that was, what? Ask. All I have to do is ask. And they might just say yes. So that was the general. And then it's General Julie Bentz. And Julie Bentz this morning was leading that Bible study. But back then, she's a nuclear scientist. At the time, she was in charge of all of the nuclear power plants for the United States around the world, working at the White House. Later, I met her again. That was for my dissertation when I interviewed her. Later, I met her again when she was at the Pentagon, and she was in charge of all of the safety of all of the military people in Afghanistan and in the Middle East. An incredible woman. What I learned from Julie was, give it all you've got. Don't leave anything behind. And those were the words that she gave to me when I said, if I were talking to a group of women and a group of men, what would be the message that you would give to them? And those were the words that she gave me. She was the only woman left leading all of these men to make sure that our troops would be safe. She would look at them and she would say, okay, you're going into this trajectory. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you the arms, and now you're going to go into here. And the next day, she would do the same thing to keep them safe. It was amazing what she did, but it's so funny because when I asked her, so what would you say? She didn't just say, well, tell them that give them all you got. She said, give it all you've got, man. Just like that. So that's Julie. What I learned from her is she's a very smart woman that came from very humble beginnings, and she lives her life with gratitude. And today she's leading this Bible study, and she asked me to say the prayer this morning. So it was kind of neat to see that. And this is what grounds me. If somebody like that, with such incredible talent, can absolutely be so humble to just look for a higher purpose to really guide her, why can't I? So that's what I learned. The next person is Jovita Carranza. She was the head of the Small Business Administration. How many of you know what PPP is? What PPP? How many of you received funds when the pandemic happened? How many of you know of somebody who received funds from the pandemic happened? Jovita Carranza was in charge of giving away all the funds. She was in charge. She was the U.S. Treasurer at the time, and then she was going into the Small Business Administration, and she was given this daunting task by the president at the time. You have to make sure that all of our business owners in the country get their money. It was an undaunting task, and when I sat with her in my car, taking her home one day, and I asked her, I said, Jovita, how in the world did you keep track of all of that money? How could you do that so very quickly? Imagine trillions of dollars that were given away. How did you do it? And she said, you know what? We knew that the main thing was to give to the American business owner, and we worked 24/7 for over 6 months. Some of my people got sick, but all of us had the higher purpose of really helping the American entrepreneur. So from Jovita, I also got humility, because when she sat in my car, we wept together and we talked about what it was like to be a woman in a man's world. And we talked about what it was like to just show up just the way you are and not to allow the titles, the front of the business card, to get in the way of building your life and doing something that is much bigger than you. That's what I got from Jovita. There's so many different people that I can talk about, but let me shift a little bit and let me talk about the three other people that you're going to be hearing from today, and that some of whom you've already heard, and what I got from them. Dr. Julie Ducharme, I met through another individual from a mutual friend from New Zealand. She said, you've got to meet this woman, you've got to be in her magazine, and you've got to just take the time, just stop and take the time. So I made the phone call, and what I've learned from Julie is the power of giving unconditionally and balancing with her husband. Yesterday, we got the opportunity to hear from Julie and from her husband, and what happened was magic. It was the magic between a husband and a wife. It was the magic and the gratitude that she had when she thanked her husband, and he very shyly didn't really want to take the thanks, just like this morning. And she did that yesterday, and he did that yesterday. And last night, what we saw was exactly how their relationship is. I've been able to experience both of them through several conversations as we're going to be doing a small announcement, actually a small, pretty big announcement a little bit later. And I've gotten to know them very well. The second person is Carrie Lee Brown, of whom you're going to hear. I met Carrie Lee in New York when she and I were speaking, and all of a sudden she just struck me. We spent the day in Malibu walking on the beach, and what I learned from her was the power of alignment. Here's someone who lives her life according to her higher values. Everything she does is aligned. We have conversations after a long day, and you're going to know who she is. She's a very powerful woman, an incredible, beautiful sister friend of mine. And what I've learned from her is the power of community, the power of alignment, and the power of giving completely unconditionally and living with a higher purpose. I won't steal her thunder, but you'll hear from her in just a little bit. And lastly, Kimberly Whittle, who is also a very powerful woman. You're going to hear about her a little bit later. And she's another person from whom I have learned the power of taking something that is very bad in your life, meaning somebody dying in your life, and then coming back and doing all of the research, and then coming back and putting something together that's changing the trajectory of health in the United States. So these are the people that have made a change in my life, that have really made an impact in my life. Today, you're going to be here for the entire day. I have an invitation for you. Take the time to reach out to somebody that you don't know and understand and figure out what their genius is and how you can actually collaborate, because together we really are stronger. So the way to get my hashtag values, my book, for free is go to my website, drbettyuribe.com, and order the book and put hashtag values 100%. That is the code, and you will get your book completely free as a gift from me. Thank you so much.